Hi, I'm Bob Morwell, recently retired United Methodist minister, and it's a great privilege to be able to address the congregation as part of this study of Advent, Christmastide, and Epiphany. As some of you know, I grew up in this church. I was confirmed in it, answered the call to ministry in it. For the last several decades, I have been mostly in central Illinois, and about the only time I've been able to come back down here and speak to members of the congregation was when I was eulogizing family members and friends. So this is a nice change of pace, and I'm honored to be a part of this special project. Let's talk a little bit about Epiphany. We're approaching that holy day, which concludes the celebration of Christ's birth and recalls the visit of the Magi. Epiphany is a word of Greek origin, and it means a moment when you suddenly feel that you understand or suddenly become conscious of something that's very important to you. The Magi are mysterious characters who appear only one time in only one gospel, Matthew. Over the centuries, our gaps in knowledge have been filled with legend and conjecture. And it's really pretty amazing how much we think we know about them that's actually come from non biblical sources. Take, for instance, the beloved Christmas carol, We Three Kings. Even the title is problematic. Matthew never says how many of them there were. The number's inferred from the number of gifts they brought. Magi is a plural word, so we can safely assume there was more than one on the expedition, but it might have been two or five. We just don't know. And there's nothing in Matthew to indicate that they were royalty of any kind. The notion seems to have gained popularity in the medieval era, about 1,000 years later. That may have also been when they were ascribed names Melchior, Gaspar, and Belshazzar. The Magi weren't royals, they were priests of the only other monotheistic faith in the Middle East at that time, a religion known as Zoroastrianism, named for its founder, Zoroaster, who lived and preached in Persia, modern day Iran, around the 6th or 7th century BC. The religion is still practiced to this day. Its adherents are often called Parsis, and the late Freddie Mercury was raised as one. Here's one more curve for you. The Zoroastrian priesthood included female magi. It's possible that the wise men were not all men. We really don't know. Along with belief in a single God, both faiths strongly stressed ethical conduct, and there's evidence that members of each group felt a certain kinship toward the other. I suspect there were those who felt that the Hebrew God, Yahweh, and the Zoroastrian god, Ahura Mazda, were the same god, known by different names. The Magi apparently believed that one way in which God communicated with humanity was through the stars. The heavens gave hints about divine intentions and plans. Matthew says they spotted a star which served as a portent of the birth of a king of the Jews. Now, we normally imagine that a star is a single body in the sky, like a supernova or a comet. But in those days, the word star meant a whole range of astronomical phenomenon, including multiple heavenly bodies interacting with one another in special ways. There are no historical records of a single bright star or a comet appearing in the skies around Jesus' birth. But there was an astrologically significant conjunction of planets and stars in that time when Jupiter and Venus came so closely together that they seemed to merge into one large bright body. In astrological circles, these two bodies stood for royalty and divinity, and they joined in a part of the sky that was associated with Israel. So, in astrological circles, this could mean the portent or the revealing of the birth of a new divine ruler in Israel. Now, the Magi would have noticed this, but most people would not have taken notice. In fact, something similar just happened in the weeks leading up to this Christmas, when Jupiter and Saturn came into conjunction for the first time in nearly 800 years. Did you notice it? Would you have noticed it if the media hadn't had coverage of it? Taking this stellar hint, the priest astrologers lit out for the Jewish homeland. But the odds are that they were hundreds of miles away in either Persia, again Iran, or neighboring Babylon, which is modern-day Iraq. As the crow flies, that'd be about 600 miles. But they weren't crows, and they had to take a longer route. A straight line would have taken them through the deadly Saudi desert, which was considered impassable. So they had to loop up through southern Turkey, down into Syria and Lebanon, and travel the length of most of modern-day Israel to get to Jerusalem, adding hundreds more miles to an already arduous trip on horseback or camelback. Now, it's fair to assume that they were hoping for something pretty impressive at the end of this long trek. But there's another example here of people filling in the blanks in their knowledge only to find something very different. They get to Jerusalem and there's nothing. No celebration or news of a royal birth. Nothing. Confused and surely disappointed, they managed to get an audience with Herod the Great. By the way, he gave himself that name. He's a narcissistic old tyrant who is now seriously ill and frankly sinking into paranoid insanity. His sons are all adults, there are no newborns, and they keep their distance from the old man because at least 2, maybe 3 of them, along with their mother, have been killed by Herod because he felt that they threatened his place on the throne. Herod was definitely not a pious man, but he kept kosher, eating no pork, for instance, in order to placate the religious establishment. This led Caesar to note that he would rather be Herod's pig than Herod's son. He and his family make the Sopranos look like the Waltons. They ask about this holy child only to learn that none has been born there. But just maybe something has happened in Bethlehem, about 6 miles away. This is enough to stir Herod's easily stirred paranoia, so he asks the Magi to please check it out and report back to him. He then plots murder as the Magi ride out of town. Now, this is where almost every nativity scene gets it wrong. They don't find him in a stable, but in a house, and it's apparently been a while since the birth. We're told that the Magi are thrilled when they finally find the child, but I'm guessing that there was something of an interview process first. This was not at all what they expected, so when they found Mary and Joseph, they would have had a lot of questions first. But eventually they are persuaded that divinity has somehow stepped into humanity in the form of this plain brown wrapper of a peasant child. They present their somewhat odd but valuable gifts, and after what seems to be a pretty short stay, they begin the long trip home, sneaking out of town. After one or more of them have a dream warning them to get the heck out of Dodge and to avoid Herod at all costs. They'd probably already been creeped out by their earlier encounter with the man. I can't help but imagine them riding off in the dead of night to avoid Herod's spies and asking each other, what did we just see? They'd expected a divine prince born amidst pomp and panoply of a royal house and a great capital, befitting the transcendent majesty of Yahweh and the holiness of Ahura Mazda, but instead they find a couple of obscure peasants and their seemingly unremarkable baby in a small town full of other peasants with a population smaller than that of DeSoto or Cobden. They're pretty much the last people in the last place these stargazing priests had expected. But then I doubt Mary and Joseph had expected anything like them either. And I think that was the point of the whole exercise, really. The whole Advent, Christmas, Epiphany arc is about discovering that God is in unlikely people, unexpected places, and even difficult times. And that is the Epiphany, the discovery that God is much closer than we tend to realize. Emmanuel, God with us. And that us includes not just the powerful, the privileged, and the noteworthy, but the small and the powerless and the seemingly insignificant. And maybe that means that none of us is insignificant, and that God can be found in any one of us as well, if we dare search and have the wisdom to see. I think Jesus was able to see and show how God can be found even in times like these and people like us. And that is the beginning of the good news. Emmanuel, God really is with us.